FM 90.
Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Hello, a very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, Makerere University students go on strike. What exactly is the problem, and what other problems could there be at the university that need urgent action? Today, Makerere University students went on strike to exert pressure on the university management to drop a new policy that students say is unacceptable. Last week, students petitioned Parliament over the matter, saying that they do not have funds to meet the demands by the university administration. The policy was introduced by the university to enable it to raise funds in time to clear its debt, estimated to be over 60 billion shillings. Private students, led by the Guild Council today, decided to demonstrate, leading to clashes with the police, who fired tear gas in return and deployed heavily at the campus. The private students are unhappy about the reluctance by government and state house to provide for students they sponsor, choking the university on utility debts, among others. Higher Education Minister Honorable Chrysostom Muyingo says government has already set in some money for its sponsored students, and that another batch will be catered for in the budget, including provisions for state house sponsored students who have now been taken over by the Ministry of Education and Sports. That aside, Makerere University still grapples with many bottlenecks that stakeholders say need urgent action to avert regular strikes. Despite these challenges, strikes by students had fizzled out for a while, considering the bloody riots that characterized the university in previous times. So tonight we ask what exactly has prompted this particular strike, and what are other problems that could be silently crippling Makerere University, one time revered as the Harvard of Africa. Our guests tonight, Mr. Ivan Kata, Guild President, Makerere University, and leader of the strike. You're most welcome, Mr. Kata.
Yes, thank you so much.
We're also joined by Mr. Morrison Rwakakamba, Executive Director at the Agents for Transformation, also an alumnus of the university. You're most welcome, Mr. Rwakakamba.
Thank you, Edmond.
Ivan, what ails Makerere?
Well, Makerere right now, when you say what exactly ails Makerere, I would say what ails the students of Makerere. Basically, it is crucial for everybody to understand, especially the public, that students basically don't want so many things. The basic requirements of a student, one, like you said earlier, is that they're eating well. Number two is that they're earning basic education and are getting it in a very fundamental way, at least the best standard that we expect in this country. Currently, what is ailing students is the aspect of education. Education at Makerere University is becoming crucially very difficult to attain. The private students today, led especially by me and some other fellows of my group, were agitating fiercely, saying that the policy that has just been initiated today, the one of 60%, is just unrealistic. And the basic reason why the students are saying the 60% tuition policy will not work is simply because it is only targeting a bunch of people, specifically the private students. Now, the private students are saying, why are we suffering when state house sponsored students have been doing exams, they've been doing courseworks, they've been doing tests for the last 3 years, and we private students cannot do the same until we have cleared this amount of money. They're saying, what is so different, what is so special about the state house sponsored students and the government sponsored students? I mean, it is not our fault that we've ended up as private students, but it is not our mandate as private students to ask government to remit its funding to public institutions in time. It is the mandate of the administration. Now, if administration is failing, we must agitate, because basically, you know, they say that constitutionally, when most of the rights have been taken away, the only right that you actually have gotten is that to rebel. So they have decided to rebel and say we need change in Makerere University.
Well, Mr. Guild President, you told us very clearly that number one priority of the students at Makerere is food, and then number two is education. Now, you talk about the 60% tuition policy. You say the beans and posho are in order, so there's no problem with the food, it's just the education. Talk to us about the 60% tuition policy.
Well, about the food, when we were coming in office, we had a little problem about the food, but I dare say the Social Affairs Committee of Parliament did a wonderful job in trying to restructure everything, especially the feeding, the infrastructure, the drainage system. As we speak right now in our candidature, we've been able to attain a restructure formation, especially done by students of engineering, that the university now looks beautiful. Now, about the 60% tuition policy, this policy actually was initiated in 2006. Unfortunately, under the leadership of Professor Mariam Reva, the policy being a flexible character, there is a way he kept on juggling the policy within the university. Makerere started being divided into two sections, what we call the wet colleges and the dry colleges. Now, the dry colleges are arts in arts, education, where people can not basically pay the money in time. The wet colleges is where we have law school, where we have ICT, where sometimes the huge number of state house sponsored students are so many. Now, the unfortunate beat right now, currently as we speak, is that both the wet colleges and the dry colleges no longer exist. What is happening right now is that the whole institution, everyone is mandated to pay 60%. Now, the unfortunate bit about the policy is that irrespective of the fact that 60% is what's required of you, it is actually 100%. Because they tell you that within 6 weeks from you entering the university, you must have paid 60%
of your tuition.
Now, this 60%, unfortunately, is that the students are supposed to be doing courseworks and tests. Now, if you paid 60%, it means you'll only do 60% of your course units. If I'm doing 8,
quid pro quo.
Yes. So if I'm doing 8, that means it's 60% of the 8. In other words, it means if you have not done another course unit, it means definitely for me to do that course unit, I have to pay 100% by the time I'm doing my courseworks and tests.
You pay for half a loaf, you get half a loaf.
Exactly. Now, you asked me specifically about the background. It is crucial that the public understand where does the policy come from. What is ailing the students this time round? Why are they agitating this time round? The problem is that government, as you mentioned earlier, have 3 types of funding it's supposed to give public institutions. The first one is the capital development fund. The second one is the wage bill, the one that caters for salaries and wages for teaching and non-teaching staff. The third one is now the tuition, the government-sponsored and the state house-sponsored students. Now, the unfortunate bit, specifically what is ailing them, is the aspect of government students and state house-sponsored students. If you look in the records of the finance, especially from the office of Professor Tikodri, Finance Administration, DVC, you're going to see clearly that over a period of 3 years, the state house has not been paying for its state house-sponsored students. Last semester we had to intervene.
3 years.
State house has not paid. In fact, its areas as big as 20 billion for Makerere University alone. Now, last semester we had a big controversy. After Professor Dumba Sentam comes in office, the students of State House nearly crashed his vehicle. They say, you know what, we must study. He was able to yield the pressure of State House. The students have been able once again to do the exams. Now that has annoyed the private students. They're saying, this time round, why are you producing a circular and saying that we private students have to pay 60%, and yet State House sponsored students, every time they insert a little pressure, you let them do the exams. When it comes to graduation, whereas we have failed to graduate saying we are stupid and have been unable to attain the degrees, State House sponsored students are attaining them. And the reason why we are failing to meet them is because we are being pressurized. Their controversy is they're saying we are not going to remit 60% only to cater for other factors like the capital development fund, the wage bill, and payment for government students and State House sponsored students. They are saying they're not going to meet these costs, and they are saying they want equality for everybody. What they're asking Parliament in the petition is to ensure that it asks government to remit its funding in time so that the policy can first of all be brought to a table where they can resolve and say maybe let's reduce it to 20% or 30%, because at the end of the day, before a student actually does his or her final exam, they must have paid 100% tuition, and that's what hurts them much more.
Morrison, do those reasons make sense? Should they be striking at all, really?
Yeah, well, you said that they are Ministry of Education students, that they are not. Do we have State House students? I think for me that's a very important debate. And like you said, some of those, I don't have the details of how those children are selected or otherwise, but I think it should be special, maybe grant to children who could have had, historical issues and problems, and somehow they found their way being subsidized by government. But when I listened to Kata, Kata, right, the guild president of Makerere University, I think really for me the important aspect is that any introduction of a new policy should not be immediate and should not be sweeping. That's the characteristic of a good policy. Meaning that to introduce a 60% mandatory payment before you attain education, before you do coursework, that is something that should have agreed on like 3 years ago. And you say, we will be implementing it in 3 years' time, such that people can prepare. But you don't let students come to campus and all of a sudden you come up with a circular. I think that is poor management, because if people were aware that this is the law, this was agreed upon, people then would be prepared and they would know, and you would not have that kind of chaos. But also, again, for me, this is the frailty within the university itself. I mean, maybe Ministry of Education or State House or some government departments have not yet paid for 3 years. Why would that happen? You see, why would that happen?
Well, but let's look at State House. They've had a crisis.
Yeah, I'm saying, why would that happen?
Right.
There has to be. I think the university has a debt correction. There could be debt correction policy.
That has to go to State House.
And I don't think it would also be a business of students. I think to correct the debts on behalf of the university ought to be seen as champion of saying, we know that somebody owes the university, so we want to strike such that person or that entity pays. I really, for me, think it goes back to the administration of the university and how it manages risks, and how it manages its budget, and how it projects, how it manages the institutions to deliver the quality education that Kata talked about, and to make sure that the conditions of students, you see, are good in a way that people can achieve education. So this blaming of State House, blaming of government, for me, this whole discussion and this whole conversation should be about how the university manages its resources and how it manages itself to deliver to the students. Because you see, Mamdan came up with very important recommendations. People at Makerere and government, especially Ministry of Education and others, refused to listen. You see, you cannot have, I think he called it a marketplace for scholars or something like that.
Yes.
And
over-commercialization, that's right.
Over-commercialization, you even accept students who you know will be so many in class and they cannot receive quality education. Even the kind of fees, by the way, that university students pay, I don't think that capitation, that money per student, would allow a student to have all of the facilities to acquire good education. It is for me little money that students in Makerere, and I think many of these universities pay. Because if you do a comparative analysis with all these universities across other countries, across Europe, across the United States, but yes, historically you still have a population where parents cannot be able to afford that sum of money, much as it is little, which calls in for government subsidy. Yes, even if you are to increase fees, even if you are to demand for 60% in order for you to operate, make sure that the policy is done right away on time, and that people affected, the parents, the students, are informed early, and you don't come all of a sudden and put a poster on the notice board and say we now want you to pay 60%. I think that's a management failure.
Listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight, Makerere University students go on strike. What exactly is the problem, and what other troubles could there be at the university that need urgent action? Our guests tonight, Mr. Ivan Kata, Guild President, Makerere University, also leader of that strike, and Mr. Morrison, Rwakakamba, an alumnus of the university, also Executive Director of the Agents for Transformation. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Ivan, Morrison was Vice Chancellor until recently. All of a sudden he leaves, and all of a sudden there's a strike. Would you draw lines at that level?
Well, Morrison, I managed to interact with him for some good time. One of the important things he initiated as soon as we came in office was to find ways of how to interact with the students. After every 2 weeks, you go to his office very early in the morning, you discuss what's on ground, what is it that the students want.
Every fortnight.
Every fortnight. Now, Dumba Centamo, I think, has a different style. I do not know whether once the new guild comes in office, he will do it. But interacting with the two people, you can see a bit of a difference. For Yamreva, probably being a little younger, he was a little flexible, especially in decision making. He was more the progressive type.
More of the progressive.
And
Dumba Centamo,
he's more the conservative. You know, if you look at his history, he's one individual who has been in Makerere since 1972. My God.
You weren't born at that time, obviously.
Oh, he's been there. He's been there working especially at FEM. I hope you know the great transformations he has done in the field of economics. Now, the unfortunate bit with the students basically is that, like I told you, the students don't want to know the intricate nature of the way things are done. Morris mentioned something critical that I started even wondering whether he went through Makerere University. But that's another debate we don't want to go through. You see, we have to understand.
You mentioned it. Don't make grand sweeping statements without clarifying them.
What he mentioned was that it is not usually the mandate of students to understand what exactly takes place, especially in management, which is true. But another thing he mentioned
No, I didn't say that. I said you shouldn't be debt collectors. You're not debt collectors.
True.
There has to be a management mechanism for collecting debts.
Now, you see what happens with the students is that Makerere, first of all, is heavily marred with a lot of politics, political intrigue, especially even within the administration. One administrator is going to run very fast and say this to students in the hopes that the students are going to arm themselves and fight against another. But I think that's not the most important factor. We were looking at Dumba Centamo and Professor Mariam Reba. Now, the conservatism of Dumba Centamo is at the parameter of probably sometimes where does someone come from, what kind of education has he attained. If someone went to Harvard University and that's where he studied from, is it possible for such a person to understand exactly how Makerere University is supposed to be run? Now, we know very well that Makerere by the right now is 90 years of age. Now, if you look at its history and where it comes from, you're going to see that numbers have been transcending every day and have been accelerating. You're going to see that right now in the main hall, almost 1,500 students are studying from there. Now, a population of such a nature gives Makerere an inability that the students can actually not meet some of the costs and demands the administrators impose on them. If you know, especially from primary, secondary, now we have free education. And free education implies that even those people who are so poor are supposed to learn in Makerere University. Now, finally, when they learn in Makerere University, if a policy of free education in primary and secondary, it means even at university, whether you want or you do not want it, it is going to explode. Because out of a population of 50,000, you're going to discover that statistically, 3/4 of the students actually are incapable of meeting this resource. And because of that particular perspective, you're going to see all these pressures taking place all the time. And now, added with the fact that sometimes someone is so conservative, the prospect that he sees things are supposed to move in this particular line, the truth of the matter is that you cannot blame the Vice Chancellor or management for wanting to impose the policy. But you see, flexibility must agree for the simple prospect that you have to also listen to what the students are saying. Another aspect, that being a public institution, every stakeholder in public usually has a contribution to make the institution. I mean, just a few days back, Muntu was in there. And when he was in the institution, you could see what he was talking about. He's exposing the students of Makerere University to what exactly the students in the general public are exposed to. Now, when things of such a nature happens, it means the minds of the students, whether you want or you do not want, are exploded. Now, imagine a situation where an administrator comes and tells the students information as crucial as this one. And you know, a student, when he begins to see figures as huge as this one, they say, my God, there is a lot of money here. There is ABCD playing ABCD. And at the end of the day, they explode.
And Bishop Zach was there with the newspaper
exactly.
in color.
Actually, today the strike that was
sudden you have
yes.
your eyes.
Yes. He opened our eyes.
That is powering some of these things. Morrison, we know that State House has had a cash squeeze. Last year this year they got about 50 billion shillings for their budget. Last year they spent about 3 times as much. And they've not asked for a supplementary budget. It's more than almost 8 months into the financial year. How is this going to be resolved? They got much less than they expected. Now they're pushing the responsibility to the Minister of Education. Dynamically, how can it be resolved in the end?
No, I do really believe that that Makerere needs to negotiate better and have a budget architecture that is skewed to the kind of transformations that have happened at that university. Because if you are giving the university 170 billion 10 years ago, I think it would be wrong to think that it's the same money that you need to be giving the university. You have had some inflationary tendencies, you've had increase in the population of the students, you've had squeeze on those facilities, you need to do a lot of stuff at Makerere University. So I think the university needs support from the Ministry of Education to be able to credibly engage the Ministry of Finance about the kind of budget they need in order to make sure that students can have a better learning environment and better facilities. But the other aspect is that above all, after all those negotiations, when the Ministry of Finance releases money to Makerere University, it should be able to publish it. You see, such that you have information about resources, budgeted resources, released resources, what the departments are accessing what, or in the open. Because you can see that even that the information that the students are acting on may even not necessarily be true, because I don't know.
The other newspaper called in a certain color given to them by a bishop at the university, all of a sudden they're going on strike.
Well,
there has been no
I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that, but the good president say he was inspired by Bishop Zach in order to lead the strike. If that is the case, that's a different issue. But for me, what I wanted to say is that there has to be clear openness, in terms of the budgets, such that students are aware these are resources that came from government, this is the budget that we have, and for us, in order to close the gap, we need private students to be able to pay by this time. All that explanation, all that openness would solve problems of strikes, problems of gross misunderstandings. And by the way, this is why I also said I haven't seen a statement, by the way, from State House or the Ministry of Education saying we have not been paying for 3 years. So it may also not be true, and you find that the students are out on the striking also from not correct information. So I think we may need to wait and engage the parameters of truth in all these activities.
There's something that we need to clarify, and I would like to get your opinion on this.
Sure.
State House has not been able to pay for a lot of students, not just in Makerere, but other universities have been checking. They've not been able to pay for other students they sponsor in universities and high school and so on. Partly because they got little money, 50 billion this year versus 150 that they spent last year. Should State House continue giving these scholarships, or should the job be given to the Ministry of Education from the start?
Well, my opinion on that is I think the President has explained why he considered appeals from some of the children.
But he can't handle them anymore.
That he has been, and that's why he's saying now, since it's a big issue, there are many people coming to the President saying we need you to help us. Let them go to the Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Education looks at their requests and then verify them and award those scholarships from a meritocratic point of view, and from and make decisions that are based on the application's kind of reasons, that would warrant that. It's a subject that I have not studied for quite a long time, but I think at the end of the day, all children of Uganda, wherever they come from and whatever they do, are supposed to access education. So yes, for me, the Ministry of Education should take on the the scholarship scheme. And I know there is a board on scholarships that is in the Ministry of Education with people like Chebet Maikuta and others who sit on that board, who have been selecting a number of students to go and study specialized courses, whether within the country or abroad, oil, science, technology, and all those kind of courses. So yes, for me, I do believe that the Ministry of Education would be the right place, really, to handle some of those issues, and the President should always, that's what I would advise him if I was his advisor to make sure that he pushes all those requests to the Ministry of Education.
Kill the State House scholarship scheme, basically.
I'm saying...
Well, forget about it. They can't pay for it. They can't pay for it. They've not paid for it since they started. They might as well stop it since the year started.
And by the way, that's not necessarily correct information. This is why I'm saying there is a need for verification. You may say government hasn't paid for 3 years, but do you have
I'm not sure about the 3 years.
Do you have credible evidence to that?
Well, this is
my suspicion is that the students could be striking on wrong information.
This is Spectrum. We're going for a break. We'll be back. We'll get the right information if you have it. Just stay tuned.
You are losing your MTN number if you don't register by the 28th of February 2013. They're going to cut it off with Papa, and you'll be there. Contactless, numberless, identityless. Basically, you'll be finished. Do you know what it means when you lose the number you have had for years? The number everyone knows. Kati, if I were you, I would go and register now. The time is up. Go and register now. I said register before the 28th of February 2013. Register now.
Make time now and register your MTN SIM cards before 28th of February 2013. Dial *197# to check your registration status.
MTN. Everywhere you go.
Be a standout. Be the star now and let your light shine through.
The Uganda Communications Commission invites entries for the 3rd ASIA Awards, scheduled for June the 7th, 2013. Visit www.ucc.co.ug/awards for information on the categories and criteria. Deadline for entries is April the 30th, 2013. ASIA, ICT Innovation for National Development.
Ça va, hello. My name is Kogole Andemina, very serious Congolese tailor. People see me when they want to look good. People leave my shop looking like superstars of TV. But however much I make you look beautiful or even sexy like me, I cannot change the person inside, the real you. Kind of like Uganda Waraji. It has this beautiful look, but inside they have maintained the same old spirit that we know. The same old spirit we have known for many years in a new suit. New look. Oh, you need to try it.
Enjoy the new look Uganda Waraji. The same Ugandan spirit with a new look. Uganda Waraji. Same spirit, new look.
Uganda Waraji.
Excessive consumption of alcohol is harmful to your health. Not for sale to persons under 18 years. Please drink responsibly. Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back. On Spectrum tonight, Makerere University students go on strike. What exactly is the problem? And what other problems could there be at the university that need urgent action? Our guest tonight, the president of Makerere, also leader of the strike, Ivan Kata. Mr. Morrison Rwakakamba, also executive director at the Agency for Transformation and alumnus of the university. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Ivan, you spoke to us about the management style being a problem, but if you are in that seat, how would you resolve this issue? Money is not coming into the university. How would you run it without cash?
Well, specifically, there is no institution that can run without finances. But the aspect that we have to remember, as a guild president, when you are elected, it means the people who elected you have the mandate to demand particular things from you. Now, when you are put into management, it means your duty at the end of the day is to ensure that the university runs. That is the obligation that you cannot avoid. Now, as part of management, it will be my mandate, therefore, to find ways of how to balance all the sources of funding. If I see that the students are supposed to make a particular contribution, and in what time phase, I will have to consider that these students must pay a particular amount of funding. But you also, like I told you, are supposed to create a balance. Look at all the aspects where the money is supposed to come from, and find parameters of how to coax the money from coming from that particular
How
source.
do you do it practically?
For example, now we have the State House sponsored students.
Yes.
We know very well that State House is supposed to fund fund particular students there. Now, what happens when I am in management and State House has failed to pay this particular amount of money? How can I find ways of how to coax them into paying this money? Number one, you have to look at where your strength comes from. The strength of any person in management comes from the students themselves, because they're his resource. It is
ask them to strike. So
no, you don't ask them to strike. Sometimes, being in a public institution, there is a time where you reach and you just can't stomach things anymore. Because when you're in a position of management, you know very well you're liable to a lot of political intrigue, especially if you're in a public institution like Makerere University. You're going to see that at the end of the day, it is survival for the fittest. Man, I saw that critically well when we were choosing the next vice chancellor. You could see that at the end of the day, particular things were coming out that were heavily intriguing. Now, it is very bad when you're in management and you begin to shoulder the problems of a particular individual. Now, management in Makerere University this time round is shouldering the problems of government. But they have refused to actually tell the students that the problem is not with them, but the problem is with the people who are supposed to be meeting their funding to public institutions. Yes. Not only State House sponsored, even the Capital Development Fund and the wage bill which government is supposed to remit.
It's not coming.
We have been talking about Ministry of Education controlling State House. Ministry of Education through the office of through the Ministry of Finance is supposed to
can't control State House. What are you saying?
What I'm trying to say is that we've been talking about Ministry of Education trying to find ways of how now it now takes over the whole project of sponsoring.
It's a procedural matter with
yes,
the government.
It's a procedural matter. And it is critical, first of all, to identify the prospect that it's very difficult for a ministry to handle issues that are highly political. Because even the students themselves who come, they come under historical political mahims.
Some of them.
Now, even the ministry itself being handled the issue of State House sponsored students is still intriguing for the prospect that in as much as it has been given that one, even the thing that they're supposed to control right now, they have failed. Because the Ministry of Education of Finance currently passes through the Ministry of Education to ensure that the wage bill and the Capital Development Fund are given to public institutions. Even these ones themselves are coming very late. The last University Council meeting under management, the biggest thing they keep on saying, especially from the Kabasa, is that we need to pay for electricity, we need to pay for this, we need to pay for this, but there is just hardly any money. And so they're saying students must pay this money in time to ensure that most of these things are done. So it implies that even ministry itself, probably Parliament can be the only one to initiate and set parameters and say Ministry of Finance release ABCD amount in such a quarter to ensure that it goes to public institutions. That is very critical.
Morrison, how do we go around this? The university needs money to operate, the money is not coming. They need them, so they ask for 60% in advance.
But you see, a university has a budget. A university has a strategic plan. A university has a development plan. They are supposed to budget for their expenditures. They are supposed to know where to get the revenues. There is the revenue and expenditure side. And that should be determined 2 years in advance.
Or even more.
Or even more. And most of these strategic plans are breathing documents. They are breathing documents. They are living documents, you see. So you don't come just in a day and come up with your document, with your and post it on the notes board and say, from now, those who have not paid 60% up should not go to class. I think for me, really, that's a management failure.
The new management after Badia left.
No, I mean you really don't do that. Otherwise, you cause friction, you cause misunderstanding, and in a student's world, you actually cause chaos. So for me, the management at Makerere, they need to reimagine what they are doing, and they need to know that institutions like Makerere should be run professionally and on plans. Even if government has not paid, by the way, that's not a problem. The university has got many legal and administrative pathways
of raising
resources, either through Bank of Uganda or through guarantees from government. Government has got very many ways, you see. So even this motive issue of State House students have not paid, all of that is diversionary. And like the guild president said, some students could be, being used by some political forces to tag this whole process to State House, which for me is not the case. The case is that the university has colossally failed it plan, manage its resources, and make sure that they create an environment. And by the way, they need to go back to even Mamdan's recommendations.
Cut the numbers.
Cut the numbers. Be more efficient. Be effective. You can never be a center of excellence. You see, when you run a university where you have 600 students in one class with one professor or one lecturer, and there is even no microphone. Those standing at the back cannot even hear. You see, so for me, it's really a package of reforms that need to happen at an institution like Makerere University. And if you want it to be a center of excellence, you either keep it public and it's solely public, or you make it private and it is solely private and it is run by chief executive officers and techpreneurs who know how to manage business in education sector. You can never mix the two. Some people say public-private partnership. That doesn't work. Academics, definitely you need government to regulate and make sure standards are there. That's very important. But you either run it as a public center of excellence, paid for by the public and taxpayers, and you are producing people who can go to the moon, and those who can innovate, and political scientists or lawyers who can do certain things. As a government where you have got strategic interests, you keep it private. Then everything else can be private. You know, there are so people, private sector people can start universities. You know, you create that kind of environment. But the way Makerere is being run and what is going on there, it's going to be increasingly difficult for children of Uganda to get novel, agile, and nimble education.
Ivan, there was talk about a loan scheme. Do you have information about that? And
yes.
Would it be a panacea?
Yes. First of all, before I even got the loan scheme, there is something little I just want to substantiate. That the issue with management this time round is that I think it is not very good at prioritizing.
The new management.
The new management, even the old, probably even the old management, there has always been a problem of financial priority. If you look at the recent election that for the new management to come in office, it cost one hell of a lot of money. You could sit on these boards and they could tell you, you know what, for one sitting 100 million is going to go. 100 million on an election. And what is unfortunate, during that particular race, particular information came to the students' ears through the office, through Dr. Tango Doi. You know Dr. Tango Doi. A lot of information was coming on media everywhere. They will tell you that the race kept on being postponed most of the time. They sit in this particular meeting, 100 million goes. They postpone and they don't come to a conclusion. Another one comes, 100 million. And you see in the intricate nature of a student looks at 100 million as 100 students who are paying their tuition. 100 students. And they say, okay, 100 students has just gone in, just someone postponing. And they just say, blah. And they said, if really we're going to be paying this amount of money, and you tell us tomorrow there is no electricity, when yesterday you are seated somewhere and discussing ways of how to bring a vice chancellor, which vice chancellor is also heavily mad with so many people saying we are boycotting the election, and that one takes place, and they say this is happening, it becomes a little intriguing. Now, coming the loan scheme, we've actually tried to agitate for the loan scheme for a very long time. Actually, in Makerere, we have what we call the Private Students Association, where it's an association that brings together all private students. We have tried writing letters to the office of the president. We have tried asking people from Enterprise Uganda to come and find ways of how they could document information for us to see how we can agitate it. But the unfortunate bit we find is that it is very difficult, one, to get information critical and how to assess ways of how to get the loan scheme. But we are saying, even in our petition, we clearly stipulated and said, if government has failed, therefore, to find ways of how to remedy this funding in time, and therefore the university's way out is the 60%. In as much as we are saying it must be trashed, that's the whole demonstration we had today. We are saying they should introduce the loan scheme in private institutions, in government institutions, public institutions, so that if we are able to meet the funding of 60%, I do my course and finish, and after I finish, then specifically I can pay back. But again, the unfortunate
bit, if you stay around.
Yes. But again, in
of a good heart.
If a good heart. But again, the unfortunate bit in our debates at Makerere, we have an issue that today currently, you know very well that in the recent graduation, we had close to 6,000 students graduating. But out of the graduates, very few come back and say, you know what, I've gotten a job. So people
okay, now they've given me the money, but what happens next? So there is a big aspect of exactly what takes place post and pre, especially after you get this loan scheme. But for the short term,
we might not be able to collect the money.
It will be very difficult. I mean, look at Enterprise Uganda right now. How many people have been able to pay back most of the money that have passed through their departments in the various banks to start a business here, and then wake up in the morning and they say they have forgiven you? I mean, this is not the way things are supposed to be happening. We're a bunch of people in Makerere who must resurrect and understand the way things are supposed to be taken. And before we actually front this issue of the loan scheme, we wanted critically, because for us now we're looking at this parameter. If government is failing to find ways of how to pay public institutions this funding, how possible is it for them to actually bring in the aspect of the loan scheme and manage it well? The one interesting thing we know very basically, even us at Makerere, we are aware that when it comes to theory, paperwork, I think our government is very beautiful at putting ink on paper. But the unfortunate bit is now how to bring themselves to a level that you implement the particular program you have initiated. And that's where the problem comes from.
Morrison, if State House is apparently pulling out of these schemes and giving it to the Ministry of Education, some people think it should probably be open to public-private partnerships. Give us a scenario on that.
I mean, which public-private partnerships? What I think is government or the public should pay for certain students in a public university for key specific sectors where there is, a malnourishment of skills in the country. Could be teachers, could be doctors, could be, well, maybe even political scientists. I don't know how, but there has to be a mechanism to say, we have done our analysis, Ministry of Labor and Industry, and we need these skills in the public service. We also need these skills in the private sector in order to stimulate and engineer our economy. And for me, those are the same kind of, those are the scholarships that should be given, whether they are 10,000 scholarships or 5,000 scholarships per year. And in a particular university, which is 100% public, you see, then the rest of the students of Uganda, you make sure that you can create a subsidy that would allow the parents of Uganda, the students of Uganda, to afford university education. That is where, for me, the public-private partnership would come in. If it is Kampala International University, you have got a government subsidy where government puts some money for research and subsidizes administration, and then you push prices, you put the unit cost, you push the unit cost down, such that majority of the parents can be able to afford it. But then retain universities like Makerere or Guru University as purely public, and that are purely public, pursuing those selected priority schemes. But the other aspect is, if you use who passes and you use merit, passing, academic merit. You use academic merit, then you actually find that students who would afford, because students who would be in Namagunga, who would be in Gayaza, would be the students even get that government sponsorship. So for me, again, government must find a formula, you see, that allows a system of fairness. Some people talked about district allotments and regional allotments in order to get government sponsorship. But for this economy to move forward, we must rethink about the kind of skills this economy needs.
All right.
In order to
let's hear from the listeners. Well, we tried to get Makerere University management to come to this discussion, but they could not come because they had to do some work elsewhere at the university. We'll try and get them to come here this week so they can talk to us about what the situation is in their own eyes and how they are working to resolve it. You can call in now. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. Our numbers tonight: 0414-348-111, 031-226-0390, 031-226-1390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you are calling from. So PPPs don't work for you, Morrison. You don't think they would work?
No, they work, but in a sense that government just comes in to put a subsidy, but that those universities that are private are led by private entrepreneurs, are led by the CEOs who know how to manage costs and make sure that they effectively.
Spectrum, hello?
Yeah.
Hello. Good evening, your name? It's fine. Your name? Yes, Steven.
I wanted to thank you for that program. Actually, it's one of the partner missions that called fellow business to another mission. And I was looking at the investment education automatically, you are not. The greatest investment in the whole world is invested on education. That's why other countries that are fighting and standing to resistance. Nonetheless, my position is that if now this government, which initiated the grants of ADFE and use in the National Education and the Universal Education cannot meet the set standard at the lowest payment that a student in a secondary is paying for the 7,000 a term and in something below that. They cannot even honor that to the extent of letting schools teach, teachers teaching without salaries, students without payment, rules of know-how, a full term, and instead considering payment either in second term or third term. How can they again cater for schooling of the Makerere University students?
All right.
So what would be the program? If you are building a house and you make a weak foundation, how best could you expect to put on more floors? I think the best and the best that are for primary and secondary would be the first good issues that would cause a better foundation and enable other people with access to university education. More better, and when the person reaches university, would do maybe the donors can be also join in banks and other programs that students can at least enjoy themselves.
All right, let's get the response to that. Ivan Kata.
Yes. Well, he has mentioned something very critical. I think he had tried to listen to what I was talking about, especially when it comes to use and UPE. You know, sometimes I find government very contradictory, especially in its policies, especially when it comes to initiating. One time they wake up in the morning and say, family planning is the way to go for everybody. And the following day you're going to hear that in government institutions, especially primary, there are million students in one classroom. If you've looked at the recent PLE results, they're going to tell you there is an increment in the performance. But if you look at the performance in public institutions, especially primary, you're going to see that there is a decline. Secondly, the same story. It is just a few historical schools like SMAC and Magunga that still hold it so high. And if you critically analyze, you're going to discover that Namagunga up to date has refused to embrace UCE, and so is SMAC. But when you look at all public institutions that have tried as much as possible to bring in the aspect of these aspects, they have actually collapsed. And the reason why they are starting to deteriorate is that government says, okay, free education for everybody. But unfortunately, it does not set the parameters and the standards to allow everybody who has been initiated in that particular institution to ensure that they attain quality education. Like I told you, if I come back to Makerere, which I think is the reason I'm here, Makerere right now is 90 years. Actually, this year we've been celebrating 90 years of existence. We are very lucky to have so many alumni people. But if you can look at the products we are getting now and compare them with the products that were obtained later, I mean, Morris is here. Probably we'll never get a Morris of his nature. The reason is simple.
Why do you mean? What do you mean?
The reason is simple. Even the education itself seems to be deteriorating every day.
I think it's getting diluted.
It's getting diluted.
Large class.
Recently, I was talking to particular people at Tuskies, and they were telling me we invited so many people to apply, and I can assure you that schools like Nkozi, universities like Nkozi, UCU, even KIU are beginning to perform even much better. And the reason they are performing much better is that whereas government is emphasizing so much, everybody must study, it has failed to set the parameters to ensure that everybody who must study must actually study. Makerere, for instance, right now, let's look at it. We have a population of close to more than 40,000 students. 45,000. If you look at the graduation right now as we speak currently, 400 students have not been able to graduate. And this was the reason they have not been able to graduate is because an issue within management. Even now, there are close to 1,000 who have not been put on the graduation list. But if you critically look at the reasons why they're not there, one, there is mishandling in ABCD. The scripts are so many that people have actually been incapable of handling it in a better way. What does this tell you? It means that actually the reason why students wake up in the morning and focally say we should use this opportunity to agitate specifically may not be the genuine factor. That there are other factors that are causing them actually to come out and start agitating. Initially I mentioned and I say that when everything is denied to you, the only thing that you actually have that you know you can do is to rebel. And I can assure you what has started in Makerere, you will see it expanding slowly by slowly, that even people in primary, if they had the energy, they will start doing so. Imagine a situation where you say...
You see, at the university level, I would, strikes can happen in the secondary schools and all that. And but at university level, you have to first exhaust, all mechanisms of settling problems. You see, the spark shouldn't take you to the streets. You need to first engage in negotiations, engage in confidence building, engage in understanding. This is why I actually thought that maybe what pushed students to this strike could be even lack of information. But I think we even give a grim picture about our education sector. I know for
you don't think it's that bad?
I think for universal primary education and universal secondary education, the critical issue was the access. You see, and then now government is working on the quality. This is why even in the UN Millennium Development Goal, the goal was never about it was so much about access for children who could not have an opportunity to get into schools. And then now the issue of learning is where the government, now that you have full access, now you need to focus much on learning. And at the university level, for me, I now do believe that we have reached at a level where the focus should be on quality, because whoever you get from a university, those are the people who are going to drive the knowledge economy that we are pursuing, that we no longer want to export and processed foods and all that. You need people who can come and establish a knowledge economy here. And even before maybe we talk about all these challenges that we have in this country, remember that Uganda's one of the key exports of Uganda is education. You have students from Burundi who are all over the place trying to get education in Uganda, students from Kenya, students from Botswana, and all these places. So for me, education, especially tertiary education, should be looked at as a strategic sector, as a strategic export sector, that you build high-class, nimble and agile universities, centers of excellence, the Harvard of Africa that you're talking about, the Stanfords of this world, that you have got exchanges and people coming across the world to come and do research in Uganda, to come and bring us dollars in order to benefit from our education system.
Morrison, does it still make sense to have government sponsorship, given that government is even,
like I said, for strategic courses in order to manage the skills gap in the country? So for me, I think governments should run certain strategic universities where there are certain strategic courses and you get strategic students to do those courses.
And we would expect Makerere University to be that. And the reason why they're
Do you think government should continue paying?
Definitely. That is the mandate of government.
Even though we have USE and UP, and there's not enough money, you know that.
Well, enough money,
The basket is small.
Well, unless you're saying they've initiated a program which they are incapable of fulfilling. But I wanted to comment clearly on what he had spoken. He specifically said that Uganda right now, we even export education.
Yes.
That is critical. But unfortunately, look at the people who actually come from Burundi, Evro. Some of them have actually only come to learn English, not in respect to French. But
that's students from Kenya, Tanzania.
Yes.
They speak English.
Especially from Tanzania. But coming down specifically to Ugandans, because I believe that's the most important fact. Even though the Kenyans themselves being in Makerere, have so many things. The priority of government, in my view, is to ensure that the basic common man is happy at the end of the day.
We have to go.
Yes.
Thank you very much, leader Diagas. Mr. Edmond Kata, Guild President, Makerere University, leader of that strike. Thank you for coming to Spectrum 9. Mr. Morrison Rwakakamba, Executive Director of the Agents for Transformation, also an alumnus of that same university. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond Kizito. Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English.
My greatest music hit of all time